Hello and welcome to the F1 Shakedown, a podcast where each week we'll be taking a look at a series of topics from the world of Formula One and shaking them down for you guys to enjoy. My name is Ollie.
I'm Welsh.
And today we're going to be taking a look at Haas. We're going to be taking a look at testing. We're going to review Drive to Survive. And we're also going to be looking ahead to the sprint races later on in this season.
Just a bit of background. The format for this podcast is we both have 5 minutes to discuss a kind of current-ish topic that's going on in the F1 world, hence why it's called the Shakedown. We don't want to spend too long on it, keep it nice and simple, maybe give a little bit of hot takes here and there. Yeah.
Perfect. Cool. Well, I'm going to kick off. We're going to take a look, or I'm going to be taking a look at Haas. So I'm going to set a timer so that I don't ramble too much, which I am prone to do. So that's running now. And the reason that I wanted to talk about Haas is coming into the season, maybe just a few weeks ago, they were still pretty much the boo boys of Formula One, and they have had some bad juju over the past few years because when they came into the sport as a new team, they had one of the most successful starts for a new team in recent history. They finished, I think, 6th in the constructors' standings. They had some really solid race results, and they were this American rock star style team coming in, and after that first couple of seasons, everything just seemed to go pretty much pear-shaped. You can take a look at the Rich Energy debacle. You can have a look at everything that happened with the 2019 and 20 car, where they were literally running different setups between Grosjean and Magnussen, and they just couldn't seem to get anything right. And alongside all of this, Gene Haas was worried about the cash situation, and they had to basically turn to Russian money to keep the team afloat. Last season, really critical time, COVID hits, everyone's got no money. They suddenly go from this team that people seem to quite like and root for with a bit of a bad edge to one that had Russian connections, which people didn't seem to like with the American team, lost a lot of their fans there. They bring in a pay driver, Nikita Mazepin, who before the season even starts, goes and, basically sexually assaults someone in the back of a cab on his way to, I think, the racetrack to do whatever he was doing that day. So, with everything that's going on with Russia right now, as well, just perfect Russian villain for people to hate. So it wasn't a good time for them. And then this season comes around and you think, you know what, they've got the Uralkali backing or whatever it is, they've got the money. And then we have what is a very difficult situation out in Europe with this war breaking out, and they had to cut ties with that. And this is a double-edged sword, in my opinion, because Mazepin going, you can already see that people are happy. F1 fans generally are happy. They seem keen to get back on the bandwagon and support Haas a little bit more. But what has also gone now with this total sponsorship going and the Russian money going is the money will have dried up, or some of that sponsorship money will have dried up. Counter that again with Kevin Magnussen coming back in, who people like. This guy came into Formula One with a ceiling as high as the moon, finished P2 in his debut race, dropped to reserve driver to put Fernando Alonso next to Lewis Hamilton at McLaren, which went totally Pete Tong for everyone involved over there. And Magnussen just couldn't hit the heights again. So I'm really excited for Haas because I think the fans are going to get behind them. I think they've got Mick Schumacher, Kevin Magnussen, attractive, fun, friendly drivers that people want to get behind.
The blonde duo.
Yeah, they might actually...
good-looking blonde. They might now officially be the best-looking driver pairing on
that might be the best. That probably is actually. Although Carlos and Charles might, have something to say about that. But, they might actually sell some merch this year now. Schumacher merch, Magnussen merch. He's coming back in. I saw some reports this week from Haas saying that the mood in the team, just having K-Mag back for this 1 week, has just accelerated things massively. Everyone's really optimistic, very positive. The cleanest of clean slates you could possibly go through. Look at their livery; it's just a white, empty sheet of paper.
They've got the little red stripe in there now, and I actually think that moves it up the list for me a lot.
Yeah, I think it looks good. They're going to need to find some money from somewhere. I think almost with what's gone on and them having to cut ties with Russia, they might find something from somewhere because people will be keen to now get back behind them. Gene Haas might be keen to put a bit more money in there. USA, democracy, Cold War vibes coming through.
So one thing I want to pick up on that you mentioned is that you said that now that Uralkali has left, the money has dried up. But we were under no illusion that Haas said last year that they're not spending any money developing that.
Yeah.
So how much of that money is already spent? I think the word is going around that they're quite good for where they were last year.
Yeah.
So is that a big deal? Like, I don't know whether it is. And maybe there's now just more space on the livery or more space in that world to take on other sponsors. And if they're good, that's when the sponsors will come. Look at Braun when they started in 2009. Completely blank livery.
Plain white cars go fast.
Exactly. Plain white cars that have just been like, just having a terrible start to the season with all of this stuff going on. Just come in and go bang.
Yeah, and I've not checked the timing sheets, to be fair, since this news broke, but I did see on Twitter that apparently Magnussen went quicker at testing than Mazepin did last season in what by regulation standards should be a quick car in his qualifying lap. So, I think potentially good times ahead for Haas. They seem quite happy, pretty, decent testing after not getting all the parts there day one, but they got some extra time from the FIA to run stuff. So I think they've managed to get a program in, and I think that K-Mag next to Mick Schumacher is a pretty attractive driver lineup. I've hit over 5 minutes as expected. Anything else from you on Haas? Any other thoughts?
Not really. As I say, I think that I suspect that it was a good strategy from them to not spend any money. If you look at the other teams they were fighting, you got Williams, snap at the feet of AlphaTauri and Alpine, who really moved away from them. It was just a scrap there. Did Williams spend a bit too much money last year improving when it's a clean slate this year? Possibly. Yeah. And that will be their target. Yeah. If they can get above Williams, then really it was worth it. Because now with the new regs going forward for the next however many seasons, they've got 1 foot ahead at the start. So, yeah, I'm liking Haas this year.
And we're not far from finding out because it's race week, unbelievably. But we've touched on it there a little bit with testing for Haas. You're going to shake down now the rest of sort of testing more generally. What did you think about testing? What stood out to you? And you've got 5 minutes.
So, obviously, we've got... I know that one is a shakedown at Spain. And what I really wanted to talk about, focus on, was Mercedes. Obviously, they've come out with this brand new design with the no pods, what people are calling it. Very, very different. Basically, making a car look way more streamlined. They seem to have some really good, top speeds. They're suffering an absolute ton from porpoising. Some of the videos of George Russell, I don't know how he hasn't got like 30 concussions on the straight in Bahrain. But what's really interesting, what I found out was that so they didn't bring anything drastically different to what they actually had at Spain. Essentially, all of the stuff that they've done with the radiators was already existed in Spain, and all they've done is they've just hidden it by having normal side pods, whatever you want to call it, and then they've come to Bahrain and they've gone, that was a red herring.
See ya.
And I went, that's a song. And I literally saw, I was saying to Sam when we were watching it, I was like, something looks strange about that Mercedes because it's like so odd at the back. It's got like a little bit of a bulge. It's kind of not doing that the Coke bottle thing as much as anyone else. And they to me, I said, have Mercedes dropped the ball on this? Because it looks like last year's car. It didn't look that different to last year's car. And then they turn up at Bahrain and it's completely different and no one has done anything like that. If anything, they've gone, okay, what's everyone think we're going to do? Big side pods, catch as much air, stick in another car. And they've gone, let's just do the opposite of that. And I think it is genius. I kind of don't know whether I'm ready for another 8 years of Mercedes dominance. I was kind of like, I really would hope if it was someone else who'd come up with that. And really, I'm disappointed in the other teams who maybe haven't done so well in the past 2 seasons. I'm looking at Alpine. I'm looking at Aston Martin, who are there or thereabouts, but haven't really made an impact. If I was in that position, I'm like, throw the weirdest ideas out at me. Yeah. If I'm Red Bull last season, I'm like, well, I'm doing well. The car's working, the engine packaging. We've got this nice new small Honda thing we got going on. That's perfect. But I don't understand why none of the other teams have gone for absolutely outrageous designs. Obviously, there's the Ferrari with the absolutely beautiful concave side pods. And that's one of the things I noticed. There are 2 or 3 really different philosophies going on here. There's people who are working like a really severe undercut under the side pods, and that includes Aston Martin, which are, I think that's the most beautiful looking engineering design. forget about the livery. The livery is top dollar, but it actually looks beautiful because it's just such a long side pod, and I think that does make it look really nice. Red Bull are also doing a very, very extreme undercut, as are AlphaTauri, obviously.
Yeah. And Red Bull bring in 3 or 4 different running designs, so who knows what's going to come up on Saturday.
Yeah, everyone's focused on Mercedes doing that switch, but I mean, Red Bull, if you actually look at it, if you know a little bit about what they're doing with the side pods, they've brought like some really different looks to it. And then you got people like McLaren, who seem to have done a bit of everything, where it's really boxy, not really concave like Ferrari. So I am really interested. I will say everyone's talking about Mercedes are behind, but a little bit behind. Hamilton's come out and said they think they're going to struggle at the start of the season. Oh, bro. Like, come on. You do the. It's the same playbook every season. It does my Sweden, because Ferrari historically don't like sandbag testing.
Yeah.
And neither do Red Bull. Aren't really known for doing it. It's just Mercedes. Like, they're the only one. The only reason why we even talk about sandbagging is because every single year they pick someone else and they go, that team is that much faster than us. Last year it was Red Bull. The year before it was Ferrari. And if you remember, the year before, Ferrari were atrocious.
Yeah.
They were atrocious. And Mercedes is there like, oh yeah, we're going to run. Oh, honestly, it drives me
We really
insane.
can't keep pace with the Williams. It's so fast on the straights.
And that's another one, the really interesting design that Williams have come out with, where they got holes in their side pods. So I thought that was for porpoising, because as the car levels out a little bit, I thought that those holes would become more prominent. And I don't really understand what everyone's. I'm surprised that no one has really addressed this before they get to testing, because nearly every team is suffering from it. And funny enough, the only team that doesn't seem to be suffering from it is McLaren.
It's because they're going so slow. No.
You say that, but I wonder whether that's what this odd design they've got is. They're doing something inside the side pods to stop the air like sucking the car too much to the ground. But anyway, that's kind of the main talking points I picked up from there. And obviously there are many, many more.
Yeah. You bang on time there with 5 minutes. One quick question we might just be able to get to is, whenever there's new regs, you see a lot of like new designs, new ways of looking at things. Everyone seems to like regress to the mean, whether it's like the double diffuser or whatever. There's so many different designs this year. It's going to might not take too long for someone to become a forerunner, but it's going to take a lot of time for the rest of the teams, I think, to all catch up to whatever the standard that we get used to become. So it could be a really interesting one.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, but I think the other thing is that the designs are so different that everything else about the car, once you've decided on some quirky design like Mercedes no pods, if that doesn't work, where do you start?
Yeah.
Do you pick whoever's doing really well and do what they're doing? But what if your engine, like the way that because essentially what I understand that they've done is they've taken the radiators and they've essentially like squeezed it under the space behind the driver. It's like, how much compromise have they made there? And if they wanted to do something like Ferrari have done, who seem to be one of the faster cars, their radiator design is going to be completely different. So I think that that's been true in the past when we changed regs. I don't know whether that's true now, because the philosophies are so different. They're so different. So yeah, I think it will be a really, really interesting season.
It's going to be interesting. It's going to be dramatic. Is it going to be as dramatic as Drive to Survive was, which is the third thing that I'm going to be shaking down here? Good transition there, if you ask me. I'll get the timer going so we don't spend too long on it. But yeah, Drive to Survive for me. So obviously it's in the news at the minute, just dropped last week. First thing I'll say is I think they've done perfect timing with the release. I think they released it a little bit earlier in the last couple of seasons, but I was so hyped watching this. Even when you know what's going to happen, they do a great job of dramatizing it. They do a great job of getting you hyped, building the tension, even though you know what happens. So for me, I think we were talking about it a bit earlier, no worse than the previous seasons. And I think some of the insults that people throw at it, I think they're getting a bit boring now, because the transition shots that don't make sense, or the media overlays of the radio on the certain, footage that people are seeing. If you notice that, this show, it's not for you anyway.
Yes.
If you know that that's the problem.
Don't get me wrong, it irks me.
Yeah.
It really irks me when
irksome.
I know that it's from somewhere else and they've taken the radio and they've placed it over a completely different clip. But also, like, I'm not there to watch. I've already watched the race. I'm there to be entertained,
exactly.
and I was entertained.
I think the biggest one for me that did stand out was they were in the George and Bottas battle. They were like lining up to start the race, and like behind Bottas you could see Silverstone, and then behind George you could see like the rain at Budapest. So that was one where I was like, oh come on. But it's the same with any documentary series. You take the best footage you've got. You want to save time and money as well with B-roll and all this sort of stuff. So for that side of things, I think the critics, we're bored of your criticism of it. I thought he did a really good job of telling the narrative of the season. Without Max, you have to rely heavily on Toto and Christian. And I think one of the reasons there was a lot more female representation this year was because it was pretty much a big dick swinging contest the whole way through between Christian and Toto. And even Jos Capita, when he come in, a lot of ball squeezing reference, a lot of X, Y, and Z.
How homoerotic is that program? I was there like, oh.
And so
this is the watershed, yeah? Christ. They had arses out last year, and they did a really, really perfect shot of George's arse, and I was like, hello.
So I thought they did a great job getting Susie and Jenny Gow back again, a bit more of Jerry as well, just getting that female representation, and I think was a good part of the narrative this year. But
agreed.
I thought they told a good story. I think one of the things that happens when Max doesn't get involved is you have to have Christian be the talking head, and with that being such a big storyline, I did miss out on a few of the other drivers. I think the protagonists that they've sort of put their hat on is Daniel Ricciardo, Gunther Steiner, a couple of the others. I thought Gasly was unlucky not to get a bit more airtime with the season that he had, but overall, I really enjoyed it. I think it did a great job getting me excited. It told the narrative really well. I feel for Will Buxton at this minute because he's getting so much memeing on Twitter for
I think it might be a little deserved.
If you start on pole, all the other drivers are behind you. But it's not his fault. It's not his fault because they have to. Is it not? They have to tell that story for the people coming in.
Those words.
He's taking it on the chin as well, to be fair to him this week. So, no, I think, not too much more to say from me. If you haven't watched it, go and watch it. I think even if you've seen the season, even if you were a critic of it before, I think they do a good job in telling the story of the season.
One thing I will say is if you're not a fan of Red Bull or McLaren, Haas or Mercedes, probably not going to see your driver. Lance literally wasn't in it.
Yeah, Lance,
Seb literally wasn't in it.
No one from Alfa Romeo.
Ocon had an episode basically dedicated to him. And I was like,
to how young he was and how he was almost a rookie. And I was just like,
I've still got one episode to watch. And I know that there was an episode about Ocon, but I literally can't remember him being in it. You know, Alonso, not in it. Was he not? Was he in it?
Barely.
So I think that's probably the only bit of criticism which I think is fair. I think you as a driver, and I saw someone else saying that it's become a bit PR-y. I noticed.
Yeah.
I definitely noticed when there was the conversation between Bottas and Toto in their apartment in Monaco. I was like, oh, God,
it's a bit made in Chelsea. A bit made in Chelsea.
Rather sick.
Yeah, there was another one when I know I said not to slag it off, but here I go. When Christian and Jerry sort of walking hand in hand in the field, she's got a muddy wellies on, but then like an all white suit. And I'm like, how many times did they say, "Can we just run that one back? Can you do that one again?" So
and how many? Do you reckon all of the because that field has probably played more of a role in Drive to Survive than Seb did.
Yeah.
They must have gone to that field about 5 times.
Yeah.
Like
one of them riding Touring board are loving it because it's just all
Oxford City Council have paid so much money. Honestly, yes. Yeah, I think it was a relatively good season. Last season I was disappointed because I think seasons 1 and 2 were so good. And I think they are starting to run out of ideas a little bit because...
Yeah. How many more times in next season can you explain qualifying every time?
Exactly.
Or sprint race every time?
I just think move away from it then. Move away from it. We've dragged in a ton of fans. Look at the US GP. What was it? 150,000 before COVID. And the first race after COVID, it's like 450,000. And everyone is talking about... The only thing I want to say, the Rolling Stones did play.
Yeah.
The Rolling Stones played. So... Maybe that's also got something to do with it.
Do they have a bigger pull than Nicholas Latifi? I don't know. Right, okay, that's enough Drive to Survive because that's way over 5 minutes and we basically didn't say anything.
Give the people what they want.
That you probably won't
Give the people what they want.
Go on then, Ed. Shoot, Welsh.
So last thing I want to talk about is sprint races. I've got a couple of hot takes on it. Well, not hot takes. I think there's two camps, but I'll give a bit of background first. So for those of you who don't know, sprint races are a new format that we added to the calendar at 3 races last year. We added it at Monza, Silverstone, and Brazil. And essentially, it's a short format Grand Prix. It's 100 kilometers. It's about 25 to 30 minutes, and it doesn't take the place of qualifying. Qualifying moves to Friday night, and then you have the sprint, and that sets the grid for the sprint race, and then the result of the sprint race sets the grid for the Grand Prix. This season, they're doing only 3 races again, and this year it's Imola, Austria, and Brazil again. But what they've changed this year is there are now more points available, and more drivers get points.
Bare points.
It's a lot of points. It's 8 points for first, obviously, and then it goes down in single-digit increments. But my thing with it is I don't like it. I don't like sprint races. If you think about the races they were at last year, Monza, Silverstone, and Brazil, I don't remember any part of the sprint race. I remember the race on the weekend.
Yeah.
And I think what they tried to do is they tried to put them at the interesting tracks where overtaking happens. Silverstone, Monza, and Brazil. Overtaking happens at those tracks. And I think they tried to do that this year. Imola, there was some overtaking. Attempted overtakes from George. Austria and Brazil. So I don't think that it adds anything, because the traditional format, sprint racing, we know what the objective of that is. Build the fastest car possible. And then the race is build a race car that can get across the line a long distance in a fast time. I don't know what sprint racing brings, because the objective is exactly the same as Sunday's format, just shorter. Now, I was saying, I know that people would say, like, well, what would you have instead? Because the format is very old. I would not change the format. I think the format works excellent. I love Saturday. I know what it's all about. I know that there's... Yeah. And also, like, I think that last year, the thing that irked me the most, I've said irked 3 times now, but is the person who gets on pole in qualifying doesn't take pole. They don't get the award. The award for the fast... It doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, what do they
so
call
the sprint
it? They've
race,
given it a stupid name. Quickest man or something.
Yeah. So the geezer with the fastest lap doesn't have the fastest lap award? I don't understand. And also, who's a race winner now? Who's a race winner now? If you won the sprint race, are you a race winner?
Not officially.
But you've won races.
Yeah.
Is that going to go on my contract for the seasons to come? And I'm going to say, well, I have won 5 sprint races. Who cares?
Yeah.
Who literally cares? But because there were so many points, qualifying was never worth 8 points. And here's the other thing: if you want to add a format, try something with a completely different objective. And I came up with one which I thought was really cool.
Here we go.
I think so. You've got sprint for qualifying, a race car for the race. What they should do is they say every team has 5 kilograms of fuel. How many laps can you perform?
What, as in distance?
Distance. How many laps can you complete?
Interesting.
Because that adds a completely different objective where you're building a car that is reliable and lasts the longest. And also, it adds in with F1's goal of being more sustainable, who can make the most fuel-efficient car. And
are we all on track at once, or is this...
All on track at once. Okay. It's a normal race, but it's about 5 kilograms of fuel.
It's where you roll to a stop.
It's where you roll to a stop. And if you keep the points part of that, I don't think people would be annoyed. And I think you could do it. It doesn't have to have any effect on the Grand Prix you could do that on the Friday.
Yeah.
And I think that that's perfect, because what I was saying was that if you build a really reliable car in F1, it means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. Look at Mercedes last year. At Brazil, they're just like, we're just going to take the penalty because we know we got a faster car than everyone else. So we'll just take penalty after penalty after penalty and go back 5 places, but we're a million times faster than everyone else. So what is where is the recognition for building a car that's really reliable? There isn't any.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting.
And that's what F1's supposed to be. It's supposed to be a sustainable sport. And we make the least sustainable cars where we just chuck like the graveyards of F1. Like, how many cars are just like written off? And because
the engines are pretty efficient.
The engines are really, really efficient, but they break after 6 races. Yeah. So how efficient are they?
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think the one thing I will say about the sprint race, which I think does add a little bit of something to the weekend, is just the jeopardy on a Saturday, which unfortunately is weighted towards the drivers at the top of the grid, which sometimes makes it a bit more interesting. But I'd say other than, was it Alonso who started on softs and stayed on softs at Silverstone or whatever he did at Silverstone? Yeah, otherwise it was not memorable. I only remember that because I was at Silverstone. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see with the race points up for grabs and them spread out along the calendar as well. It could be a little bit more impactful for the championship, but yeah, I haven't really enjoyed them, I wouldn't say. And I agree with you. Something else would be interesting. Or like you, I don't mind Saturday. I enjoy the Saturday qualifying.
The fact that Saturday qualifying in the sprint race now doesn't mean it. Like the tyre choice doesn't matter. If you go Q3 but you're 10th or Q2 but you're 11th, like on the Sunday that looks a lot different in the traditional qualifying. Now it literally means nothing. What is the point of Q1, Q2, Q3 if we're going to have sprint races? Yep. Who could just go out and set the fastest lap? It doesn't matter. So that's my not controversial opinion, because I'm sure I share it with lots and lots of people. Yep. But that's my take on it.
Brilliant. Awesome. Well, there's all the shakedowns of the 4 categories that we said we wanted to look at. We also wanted to have a look at some hot takes / bold predictions for the season. I'll kick off with one of mine. This one's a bit less structured. I think you maybe got some other ideas to how we want this one to run.
I haven't thought of exactly 3, but I've got a lot of hot takes. So
yeah, we could be here all night potentially.
I'm good.
I've got a hot take for you straight away, which is I was going to say Carlos Sainz is going to win 2 races this season, but I'm going to change it to Carlos Sainz will win as many races or more than George Russell. And the reason that I think that is, one, if you follow me on TikTok, Ollie Swift F1, you'll know I'm a huge Carlos Sainz fan. I loved him when I was at McLaren. One of my favourite things to look at, which I've jinxed him now, but if you look at his finishing positions in Formula 1 championships, it's literally a perfect upward arc. The guy gets better and better. Obviously, he's moved to better cars, but outbeating teammates. I predicted he would beat Charles last year, which everyone said, you're an idiot. Most of my other predictions were wrong, but that one did come in. And I think that Ferrari are going to give him a car to compete. I think George obviously had that amazing, race when he stepped into the Mercedes. But I also think Mercedes, maybe this is me after Drive to Survive getting too hyped about this rivalry, but I think they want to get Lewis ahead of Max more than anything. I think George is really going to have to temper his expectations in the team. And they were talking about, they've looked to the future with George Russell. They need to. Bottas isn't good enough to lead that team. But he was, a little bitch when he needed to be a little bitch. And George, I don't think, wants to be that.
Correct.
I think they're going to say to George Russell, just sit this one down for 1 year. Give us 1 year, because once Lewis has 8, and once he's beaten Max, and we've got revenge on Christian and the Red Bull guys and the FIA and everyone else, then you've got free range. I'm not saying that if George goes out and wins the first 5 races, they're going to say, no, this is Lewis's championship. But if, as you expect would happen, Lewis and Max are, ahead generally of most of the field after 3 or 4 races, straight away it's going to switch to this one's for Lewis. And I think there's going to be occasions where George will be slowed down and Ferrari don't care. They're going to go for it. And I think Carlos, 1 fluke win, he deserves 1 fluke win, rain, whatever. He's earned one of them. I think his talent's going to pull him through and the car's going to pull him through for a couple more.
I'm going to completely ruin everything you just said.
Go on.
I think Carlos is going to win the Drivers' Championship.
Yeesh.
No joke. I put money on it at the end of last year. There was word at the end of last year that Ferrari were going to be good. I put money on it. So I have to say that that's my hot take, because I think it's going to happen. Genuinely. So let me lay it out for you. I think Ferrari have a car that can win races. Mm. I think that Carlos has proved that he can be better than Leclerc.
Yeah.
I think that whilst Mercedes are sandbagging, no doubt, I do think that they have some gremlins. I think unless they're doing the porpoising on purpose, why you would do that, I don't know. I think that is going to be a problem for them. And I just think that, I'm hoping that this championship is not between Mercedes and Red Bull again. Yeah. So there is a little bit of hope on that. But genuinely, I don't see why he can't. I don't see why. There's probably 4 drivers in my head that I think could win it. I think that's Lewis, George, Max, and Carlos. Maybe 5. Maybe we could add in Leclerc. I think that those are the 5 at this moment in time that are up for doing it. And I think that any of those picks is a good pick.
Yeah, that hot take turned into quite a lukewarm take because we agreed quite
Well,
quickly. But,
I don't think.
I agree. I'm totally on board.
I don't know
think
why you wouldn't
Sainz
just
is,
go all out. Like, if you think he can win, I think he could have won a race last year.
Yeah.
So now he's got a more competitive car. I don't know whether it's so much the Ferrari have taken a huge step forward. I get the impression that the development, battle that happened last year between Mercedes and Red Bull might have meant that they just haven't taken as big of a step as they should have.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's made it really interesting. One final thing that I want to add on Carlos Sainz and why I think that what I want us to go back to is the last time there was a major regulation changes. There was someone who I think was a similar kind of story. Jenson Button had been an excellent driver. As you said, had like progressed, gained the experience, but gone from a clear newbie to a proven, controlled racer, and then won it. And I think that the same elements are in place for Carlos to do the same thing.
Yeah, interesting. Well, yeah, not too far from finding out. Both big Carlos fans, let us know in the comments as well what you guys think. Another one from me, keeping it on Spanish vibes, is this one's hot. If you thought Carlos wasn't hot enough, this one's gonna burn you. So, Fernando Alonso will exit his contract with Alpine if they haven't delivered a car to him that is competitive before the season is ended. And the reason that I've put that out there is he was really, really clear on what he wanted when he came back to Formula One. He said he wanted to be competitive, and Correct. He said all the things that anyone coming back into F1 says. Kevin Magnussen said the same thing. He's not going to win a championship. But I honestly think that Alonso came back seeing guys that he used to battle with still on the grid, Lewis still winning championships, knowing that he's still a brilliant driver, which we saw that in part last year when he was defending certain races, podiums.
Oh, last year I think he was one of the standout performers and that didn't get talked about enough. And that's why I was upset he wasn't on Drive to Survive.
Yeah, and the car just couldn't keep pace with what he got. They had a couple of decent results, Alpine.
I think they took a step back.
Yeah, mostly by luck, I would say. And I think one of the things that he doesn't want to do, we saw his frustrations with McLaren when he ended with them last time, was he doesn't want to be racing around in 14th, 13th, 12th, battling for 1-2 scraps of points. Oftentimes scrapping for...
I think he hates fighting with newbies.
Yeah.
He hates fighting with rookies. He sees himself as up there, pinnacle of the sport.
Yeah, and he had some great battles with Russell, but he doesn't want to be there. He wants to be fighting Max, he wants to be fighting Lewis, he wants to be doing whatever.
And he should be.
Yeah, and I do think that if they don't give him something that's even mildly competitive, and particularly if Esteban maybe sneaks a podium or something like that like he did last time.
Oh, yes.
He could quite easily say, you know what, forget it. I've had my time, I did it again. Or he might even have options elsewhere. I mean, you look at what happened to Perez when he became available.
I was going to say, I think Perez, this might be his last season, and then is there a space... Maybe.
Yeah, imagine you're, a team that is progressing and suddenly Fernando Alonso is back on the market for next season or even midway through. So let's see, let's wait and see. But I think, hot take, if Alonso is unhappy, he might call it a day.
It's gonna sound like we work together on these hot takes because I'm gonna take what you said and I'm gonna add to it. I think Alpine are going to come last in the Constructors' Championship. Because they've had... So if you go... And this is what I mentioned. So last season, I think they've taken a step back this season. If you remember the last year that Danny Ricciardo was there, they'd just made did they get two podiums that year?
Danny got one.
I thought they got two. I thought Danny got two.
Oh, maybe. Yeah,
maybe.
He did get two.
But they're up on podium level. They were back in the race for best of the rest. And they were nowhere to be seen last year. Add to that, they were nowhere to be seen, and I think Aston Martin were also nowhere to be seen. And did they finish behind them? This is now we're gonna look like idiots now, but
who knows?
I just don't think they look very good. I think when their design came out and went, if that's the actual car, that looks exactly like the F1 one. Which, if that's what it is, that's never a good sign. I don't think there's nothing innovative on their car. It looks really bad. And I just think that it's that slow decline, similar to McLaren, similar to Williams. And I think that they are going to be the next on the doorstep of leaving F1.
Interesting.
I think.
That's hot as well. I would be surprised, but they go hand in hand, like you said. Which I just think that the bottom two teams, Williams and Haas, have focused very much on not being in the bottom, and that's a very different mindset
from
Romeo,
thinking
Alpha,
that you're
back there as well.
I do. Yeah, Alfa Romeo are probably the only other ones I think will drop that low. But essentially, there's a very different philosophy in a teams that are fighting for last place or come last in the last few seasons, trying not to be last. It's much easier to not be last than it is to
win.
Like try and be good.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. And Alpine have just tried to be good, and I think that they're going to completely not see coming last in their rearview mirror, and then they're going to get absolutely shunted past by the rest of the teams. That's my hot take.
Go on then. Have you got one more to finish us off with?
I think the Haas are going to finish a lot higher than people think. I think that their idea of I'm just saying, they were so bad last year. They definitely didn't spend a single penny on development. So it must all be on this year. And looking at their times, Magnussen, did he top the time charts once in testing?
He was fast. He got beaten out, but for a while he was the top dog.
He was looking really quick. I think that Mick's going to take a step up. Now that they're not in an absolute dog of a car, are we going to be able to actually see Mick Schumacher and Magnussen? Like, Magnussen's proved that he's a very good driver. And also, I don't think we've got the real picture of Mick. Like, I know that there was Mazepin last year, and he spun out a lot, and Mick spun out a lot. But maybe that's because the car was absolutely terrible. I think because last year they obviously made those changes to the back of the car. They said you got to have less of a floor. And they've just gone, just cut it off. Just cut it off and just hope that it works. Like, if the engine runs, we're good. So, yeah, I think that the Haas might finish a little bit further up the order. I'm going to say 6th. 6th. I think they're going to come high. I don't think Alfa Romeo will be up there. I don't think Alpine will be up there. And then I think it's going to continue. All the stories will stay the same. Red Bull versus Merc. McLaren and Ferrari, I think, will maybe find each other a couple of times. And then Haas and Williams. I think all the stories are going to stay the same.
So if Sky request a bet are listening, that's a threefold acca on Carlos Sainz champion, Alonso leaving mid-season, and Haas finishing
to 1.
6th and Alpine last. So we'll put a quid in on that and see where we go. Awesome. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us on the first episode of the F1 Shakedown. We'll do this weekly. I don't even know. We've not decided. Maybe weekly. Let's see how we go. Try and get it weekly.
Let's just see how we go, because our takes might be so hot. People are like, no, we can't listen to these geezers chatting absolute nonsense.
So yeah, let us know in the comments if you're watching on YouTube what you think about the shakedown and any predictions you've got. If you're following or listening on Spotify, make sure to follow us across all that stuff. And yeah, we'll see you on the next one.